Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English-language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Good morning, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered on 3CR. June's coming up, and June is regularly telethon month where we raise vital funds to keep 3CR open. Listen to this next ad, and then we've got a very special guest for you. Stay tuned.
Throughout the month of June, we'll be asking you, the listener, to support radical, community-owned media during our June Station Appeal.
We'll be taking donations online to help keep the station going for another year.
Like so many community organisations, we're feeling the impact of COVID-19 restrictions, and we know you are too.
But independent community media is more important than ever, and we hope you can show your support with a donation.
The 3CR Station Appeal starts on Monday the 1st of June.
To donate, go to 3cr.org.au.
3CR, here to stay.
Good morning and welcome back, Yusuf. Thanks for joining us in your own show.
Good morning, Nasser, and good morning, dear listeners. Thank you. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you, my friend. Great to have you. Now, Yusuf, it's the last day of Ramadan today. Tomorrow is Eid, a very special time for Muslims all over the world. Unfortunately, not a special time for Palestinians, and especially not a special time for Palestinians ex-Yarmouk.
Yep, correct. So, we're talking about an ocean of suffering, where refugees of 72-year-old endless journey are in. But even within this big ocean of Palestinian statelessness, unfortunately, there are hidden layers and layers of pain and sadness. And one of the most neglected groups and marginalized groups is the group of ex-Yarmouk Palestinians who were forcibly removed from their homes to the northern parts of Syria, and they have marked the second year. So that's the group we're talking about.
I mean, our listeners are aware we've done a couple of shows on Yarmouk. Let's go back there to the devastation that occurred, and then specifically what happened to them to the north of Syria, and then let's talk about Omar and the appeal.
Yes, we're talking about, of course, if we put it in context, in historical context, more than 800,000 Palestinians were driven out of their homes in 1948 at the guns and terrorism of the Zionist gangs, the Haganah, Stern, Ergon, and others. Around 90,000 ended up in Syria. And these 90,000 Palestinians, from 48 to today, or to the beginning of the Syrian civil war, to 2011, they became around 450,000. As you know, our families are a little bit bigger than average Australian families. So more than 500,000 Palestinian Syrians. Because of the Syrian war, this number, of course, changed rapidly. Some internally displaced, some stayed in their places, but the majority became refugees in the neighboring countries of Syria, particularly Lebanon, small number in Jordan, small number in Egypt. And we're talking about also about a group that faced double-class refugees compared to the Syrian refugees in these areas. So let's leave the refugees aside for now and go back to those who stayed in Syria. Because of the targeting of Yarmouk, the majority of Yarmouk population fled. But some had no other options, and they chose to stayed in their homes. And later, this became their biggest crime. Staying in your own home became a bit of an accusation if your area and territory is controlled by terrorists like ISIS. So the problem is that if you stay in your home and then ISIS controls or occupies the place, then other warring parts will view them as a hub or incubators of terrorism. And that will be an indirect accusation of these civilians. The problem is when the dust settles in Yarmouk, and that, without going through the stages of the suffering, because this itself could consume a whole episode or more. Let's skip to 2018, where the destruction of Yarmouk. At the end of that, this group of people found themselves in the accusation box. They needed to defend the very simple question, why did you stay home? And that resulted in driving them out, forcibly removing them to the northern part of Syria. So we're talking about 1,500 families, 4,500 plus refugees who were third generation or fourth generation refugees of 1948, having to find themselves again in May 2018, driven out of their homes in a tent, literally in tents, with only the clothes they have on. May in the northern hemisphere is summer. So soon after winter came, and they had literally nothing. They had no winter clothes. So of course the problem escalated, the humanitarian problem escalated, because these 4,500 Palestinian refugees did not stay in one place. They were scattered in a bigger ocean of internally displaced Syrians who number more than 3 million internally displaced Syrians. So it's very hard to identify, to locate them and to dedicate a Palestinian program in this big ocean of internally displaced Syrians. So we're talking about a highly marginalized group, and unfortunately a group that has been unfairly labeled by the media, including, unfortunately, some of pro-Palestinian media, that they are incubators or hub of terrorism.
I mean, the reality, we've spoken about it before, but just give a recap to our listeners. Aside from the fact that they've had no love internally, the reality of being a Palestinian Nakba survivor within Israel, as far as the United Nations go, as far as Lebanon or Turkey and Jordan, the countries that have taken most of the Syrian refugees.
Correct.
That's not a proposition available for Palestinians.
No. Even we're talking about wartime, and missiles, rockets do not discriminate and differentiate between who's Palestinian, who's Syrian, who's anything else. Unfortunately, the neighboring countries of Syria treated refugees differently. There is a set of rules and regulations that were applicable to Syrian refugees in Jordan, Turkey, Lebanon, and Egypt, and another set of rules and regulations that were applicable to the Palestinians of Syria. And these regulations, in summary, would mean that, first of all, denial of entry, and if they finally made it, more restriction of freedom of movement, and denial of international charity programs, and most important, denial of registration in the United Nations, the UNHCR. This is a legal issue, an administrative issue, but because it was not resolved in 2011 and 2012, it led to a series of subsequent obstacles that only the Palestinians of Syria in these countries suffered. For example, as you would know, refugees are eligible for protection if they enter another country. Without the UNHCR, you don't have any proof of being a genuine refugee. Without the certificate of registration that UNHCR offers and gives to the refugees, you cannot prove that you are a genuine refugee, and therefore it makes you indirectly an illegal infiltrator into that country. That's number one. Number two, the denial of registration deprives the refugees from aid that only that international aiding organizations provide, given that the refugee provides a certificate of registration at the United Nations. And third, of course, because if the statelessness is prolonged and there is no possibility of return to Syria, the refugees who hold UNHCR referral are eligible for third country resettlement. For example, Australia is a signatory on Geneva Convention of Refugees, resettles some of these UNHCR referred refugees. But because the Palestinians of Syria do not hold the UNHCR certificate, they are again deprived from third country resettlement. So it's an added level of pain and suffering that only this group of people faces. And this is outside Syria. The situation inside Syria because of war is a matter of life and death. And we've seen since 2011, especially in Yarmouk camp. And when we talk about Yarmouk, I want to remind our listeners that we're talking about the biggest refugee camp in Syria. We're talking about what the Palestinians used to call the capital of Palestinian diaspora. And we're talking about the place that became the reservoir of the Palestinian revolution after 65. Reservoir in men. In Yarmouk camp, this is the only refugee camp that has not one martyrs cemetery. They have two martyrs, يعني مقبرتين للشهداء. Two cemeteries for martyrs only. No other refugee camp has this number of martyrs than Yarmouk camp. And this, when talking about the martyrs of the Palestinian revolution against Israel. And so there is a symbolic value and meaning and weight that only a refugee camp like Yarmouk can carry. So after 2011, there is also, in addition to this symbolic value and meaning of Yarmouk, Yarmouk is strategically located to the southern part of Damascus. And whoever controls this place controls the passage towards Dar'a and Huran region in the southern part of Syria. So it became, soon after the escalation in Syria, it became a center of attraction to both parties. And they were caught in this struggle, in this civil war. There was very, both sides had their eyes on Yarmouk for military reasons. And it was nearly impossible for the people of Yarmouk to stay, to convince the world that they are impartial and they are not taking parts. And so that brought more military confrontation towards their doorsteps. And then the control of opposition in December 2011, which was followed by the MiG jet fighters attack on Yarmouk. And the MiG is equivalent to F-15 maybe, or F-16 jet fighters, targeting a refugee camp. So it did huge damage to the refugee camp and resulted in the exodus of 90% of the population the day after. So that was followed by a siege, tightened siege by everybody, which was followed by a hunger. More than 300 Palestinians of Yarmouk died of hunger. People had to eat grass. People had to eat anything. And literally people died, were starved to death. And later, in 2015, ISIS raided the camp, and under the pretext of fighting terrorism and fighting ISIS, Yarmouk camp was completely destroyed. The beginning of the destruction started in April 2018, and it took place over 2 weeks or more than 2 weeks. But at the end of the 2 or 3 weeks, each and every building in Yarmouk was destroyed. They did something similar to the carpet bombing of Dresden in the World War II. Yeah. And the remaining civilians who managed to stay alive were forcibly removed to the north. So it's a very, very painful journey.
Palestinians out of Yarmouk, these few thousand, have been living for the best part of 2 years now in makeshift tents, third and fourth time refugees from Nakba to now, sitting in the north of Syria. They're in, absolutely disgusting conditions. When we talk about, I remember seeing the pictures during winter of the mud just flowing through the tents. You've launched an appeal, Aspire has launched an appeal. We're trying to raise some money for a specific project, which you've named the Omar Appeal.
Yep.
Before we talk about the Omar Appeal, tell the listeners, remind them, because we've spoken about Aspire before, about its genesis and what Aspire has done to date.
Aspire is a refugee support group that was founded in 2008. Yourself, Nasser, and I were one of the founding members in June 2008. If you remember our dinner at Boheme restaurant. Exactly. The idea was to provide language and legal support to the Palestinian refugees who fled conflict zones in Middle East, particularly back then the Palestinian Iraqis who fled sectarian violence in Iraq and got stuck on the borders between Iraq and Jordan and subsequently Iraq and Syria. And 3 years into their plight, 3 years into their statelessness that started 3 years before the beginning of Aspire, we realized that we are in front of a humanitarian crisis. Some Palestinians got stuck on the border, and we thought maybe we can just help them fill applications and apply, between brackets, legally to Australia. And we had an amazing blessing and luck, and we were able to resettle 35 families over 2.5 or 3 years from the Palestinian Iraqis, or maybe 4 years since we started back then. And so Aspire is a refugee support group. It provides language and legal support to stateless Palestinians who flee conflict zones. That's the beginning. With the eruption of the Syrian crisis, the scale of refugees were doubled more than 10 times, because we're talking about a group of 2,500 people, and now all of a sudden we're talking about tens of thousands, and maybe more than 200,000 stateless ex-Syria Palestinians. So we could not do anything to this big scale of ex-Syria Palestinians in terms of resettlement to Australia. But the biggest blow to Aspire came in 2013 with the arrival of Tony Abbott, which unfortunately applied a discriminatory policy towards the Palestinians of Syria, and not just the Palestinians, but also the favoring minorities, favoring the Christians, the Alawites. There's nothing wrong with favoring or preferential treatment to minorities, but you have to include all minorities. Mm-hmm. If you want to protect the vulnerable groups of Syria, that is the religious minorities, why did you exclude the Palestinians of Syria? So there was a discriminatory policy, and we tried on individual level to apply to around 20 families since 2014, and we had zero luck with this conservative government starting from Tony Abbott till today. So that's Aspire.
Go back for a second. I think it's important for our listeners to know that Tony Abbott was specific about the refugees he would allow to come from Syria. They were specifically Christian.
Yes, exactly. They made it clear that we are only going to resettle Christians, but the pretext was protecting minorities. So even if with their own words, they contradicted themselves. And we had the help of people like Member of Parliament Maria Van Vacchino and others. We tried to raise this issue, not to exclude the ex-Syria Palestinians from their resettlement program, and unfortunately we had no luck.
But we managed to get over 100 human beings, Palestinians, to Australia from Syria, and that was
from Iraq. Yes.
We have had some success before, so dear listeners, I'm going to give you the account details a bit later on and give you an idea of how you might be able to contribute. So make sure you've got a pen and paper ready. Did you want to add anything else to that, Yusuf?
I just want to say that maybe we should talk about Omar, because while we are not a charity organization, we cannot say no to charity elements sometimes, especially when you know the scale of pain and suffering of people. And it was nearly impossible to do something for all of the 4,500 people. So we thought, if there is one group among these Palestinians, what is the most needy? What is the most needy of the all needy people? And we thought we have a pattern of orphan children, and we do have 260 orphans. Of course, we didn't know that we have this number of orphans at the beginning. We thought maybe we'll target widows and single mothers. But then we thought, if a single mother is caring for three, cannot be treated equally with the single mother who's caring for one. So why not talk about the children? And that's the idea. And in Arabic, let me say that the word orphan applies to the child who lost a father or a mother or both. Unlike in English, where you have to lose both parents to be called an orphan. So we do have 260 orphans, and we asked, what is the youngest orphan we have? And they told us, well, Omar is 2 years and a couple of months. His father was killed in the destruction of Yarmouk a few days after he was born. So we named the campaign after Omar, the youngest orphan of the 260. And our idea was to just pay every orphan $50, as simple as that, to raise some fund so we can donate $50 to every of the 260 orphans. And with the support of our community and whether Palestinian or pro-Palestinian Australians, we have raised around 4,000, but we are still far. So I encourage my dear listeners to donate. This is one of the most needy groups among the population of Palestinian refugees, and it will go hand in hand to the carers of these orphans. $50 each to 260 orphans.
So we've raised about $4,000 this head out of a goal of 13,000.
Yes.
So we've still got a bit of a way to go.
Bit of a way to go, yeah.
Bit of a way to go. We'll give the account number soon, ladies and gentlemen, so make sure you get your pen and paper ready so you can write that down. We should talk about Omar's father, Yusuf. The reality is he was a third-generation Nakba refugee.
He was a young man who's a third-generation Palestinian refugee. He came from the northern part of Palestine. The majority of Yarmouk population are from the region of Safad, Haifa, Akka, Tabariya, Al-Jalil. So the northern part of Palestine. For geographic reasons, if you are from the north, you flee to the north. If you are from Jaffa, Negev, you go to Gaza or to the West Bank. This young man stayed in his home all the 7 or 8 years of warfare close to his doorsteps. He survived hunger. He survived ISIS. He survived snipers. He survived the explosive barrels. But the last chapter was too strong to survive, and he was killed. A few days after Omar, his son, was born. So we're talking about, Omar doesn't know anything. Omar was born in, he doesn't even know the camp. At least his father knew the Palestinian, a small imaginary Palestine they created in Yarmouk. Now, when Omar grows up, he will grow without even this imaginary Palestine, because Yarmouk was a small homeland. They named the street after their places. They wrote patriotic graffitis on the wall. I have seen Yarmouk more than 20 times because my mother's family are all, my mom was 6 years old when Yarmouk was built. So I know Yarmouk inside out. So it was literally a small Palestine. So when you lose that imaginary connection, even your definition of homeland will change. Even your connection to your grandfather's homeland will change. But with the support of his parents and his relatives and his community, and now us, the refugee support groups and the solidarity groups among non-Palestinians, we can keep Omar, we can provide Omar with enough, a little bit, maybe I shouldn't say enough, with a little bit of support so that they can keep going.
Well, it's a little bit of a gift on after a month of fasting for Eid. Listeners, the account name is Australians for Palestine. The BSB is 083125. The account number is 8664138885. And note Omar Appeal as a payment description. Again, that's Australians for Palestine. BSB 083125. 083125. Account number 8664138885. 8664138885. And noting Omar Appeal as the payment description. I'll also put those details into the podcast descriptor, so be sure to go there if you didn't catch those bank account details. Yusuf, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing for the past couple of months while you've had your hiatus go?
Thank you again, Nasser, and I'm betting on the generosity of our listeners, and I want to thank them in advance. And I think the last 2 months has been a challenging time for all of us, not just in Australia, but around the world because of the lockdown. And we might be lucky here in Australia because at least we find food on the table. At least we don't run out of water or electricity. At least we don't worry about feeding our kids. And I want you to keep in mind those who don't have the luxury, the luxuries we do have in Australia, particularly the Palestinians, wherever they are. And while it saddens me to after 72 years of Nakba, that we are still talking about the humanitarian issue of the Palestinian plight, we should be in a much better place. We should be now talking about how to empower the state building, maybe, or the revolution. But unfortunately, we're still talking about square one of Palestinian statelessness, a little bit of food, a blanket, some winter clothing, because the plight. This is why most Palestinian advocates say the ongoing Nakba. It is ongoing. It is a never-ending cycle. It's a vicious cycle. It is very evil. It keeps repeating itself in different forms. And unfortunately, the common denominator in all these cycles is that more Palestinians are crushed under the feet of elephants, like they say. More Palestinian children face thirst and hunger and not having access to education or medical support. So that's why the essence of Aspire, I would love that we don't have to have Aspire and we focus on advocacy. But the reality is much worse than that. Reality is stronger than that. And we do need to remember the humanitarian plight while we are in our advocacy campaigns.
Thank you, Yusuf. A very useful summary there. In the last minute and a bit, though, I'm sure our listeners, you've had such a long relationship with them. They'd love to hear about you personally. What have you been doing?
I have been doing some writing. I've started the journey of writing in Arabic for a collection of short stories. I think the turning point was that some big names in Arabic, big names in critique of Arabic literature, gave me their support, and they made me have a bit of more faith in my own writing. And now I feel that I can publish something before the end of the year. So be prepared for. I'm going to be a bit stuck up if I do that. So, but for a short period of time, and then go back to the normal usage.
Well, we love you and we miss you, and wish you every best success.
Thank you so much, Nasser, for keeping the show alive, and thank you to all our listeners, and happy Eid to our Muslim listeners.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Yusuf. So great to hear from Yusuf again. Don't forget, if you can support Aspire's endeavour to give so many presents to those orphans of Yarmouk in northern Syria, please donate. We'll put the account numbers in the podcast link. Again, Australians for Palestine, 083125, account number 8664138885. Thank you for your support. Make sure you note Omar Appeal and Free Palestine.